Hello everyone, and welcome back to the RimWorld 1.5 Anomaly DLC series, where today, my friends, we have a lot of work to do on our defenses. As mentioned at the end of last episode, today we will be awakening the monolith. And God only knows what's going to be coming out of this thing, so we need to ensure that we are prepared to the best of our ability. In the meantime, we've actually finished our anomaly research into insanity weaponry, which is going to allow us to create weapons like a psychic shock lance or something to that effect, as far as I'm aware. Not gonna lie to you, I didn't really care all that much, as I was mostly interested in researching how to do a ritual to create that blood rain that we saw last episode. You never know when you may have a siege and you need to stay inside and cause all of your enemies to go berserk and kill each other. Sometime later, and we would actually have Wise here begin doing a little bit of trading with an exotic goods trader that was in our base. We ended up purchasing a bionic spine as well as a tough skin gland, and as you could probably guess, I plan on installing both of these onto Fugly. And because of this, I also wanted to research sterile materials, that way we could have a proper hospital to install these in, but I'm not gonna lie, later on when it happens, I kind of forgot. But then something insane happened. We had a Revenant attack. Apparently this extremely dangerous creature was hiding among the shadows, invisible to the naked eye, before revealing itself to attack one of the traders. We began shooting at the monster, and to our surprise, this seems to have made it flee. We gave chase to the beast, hoping that we would be able to take it down so that we could study it, but if we really had to, we would be willing to kill it. However, as we were chasing it, it seemed to completely disappear, leaving behind in its wake nothing more than a few track marks on the ground. And with that, we had completely lost any trace of the monster. At least for the time being, that is. Back home, everyone was trying to put out a fire that was caused during the little skirmish that we had fighting with the Revenant. It was also during this time that we noticed a piece of flesh that was lying on the ground that seems to have fallen off of it. Akio had managed to analyze the sample that was left behind, and he actually found a biosignature. Essentially, what all this means is that we will now be able to track the Revenant for further distances with its markings. It also provided information that we could actually find it out there in the dark and reveal it by using flares, explosions, EMPs, or even fire. Could be the perfect opportunity and excuse to use the burners on our Hellcat rifles. The only issue being, though, I don't have enough bioferrite right now to actually recharge them all. Of course, though, there is a much better solution to this. Using a bioferrite shaper, I believe it is called, we can actually make a flare pack, which is exactly what we had Jasper do, and we would equip it onto Fugly. What this pack will allow us to do is to deploy up to 6 flares where we can actually stun and reveal a monster such as the Revenant or even a Sight Stealer, the types of creatures that hide themselves. I then noticed that the traders were leaving, and this was fine of course, but there was one little issue. They had left their friend here, and I don't know how I didn't notice up until this point, but they've been lying here on the ground for a very long time, so long in fact that they've actually began to starve. And the entire reason being because they are under some type of hypnosis from the Revenant that can actually only be broken once we kill it. Until we can manage to do so, Ern here will actually be our guest and or patient. We couldn't just allow them to lay in bed all day though, no, we had to break that hypnosis and save them. So Fugly would take out a small squad and begin searching for this Revenant with her flares. Based on the original message about the Revenant, I assumed that it couldn't be too far from where we had last saw it, and it would turn out that I was correct. We had uncovered the monster and tried to flush it out of its hiding spot. For whatever reason, it wasn't all that interested in actually fighting with us one-on-one. We began chasing it down as it actually began making its way towards our base. It's extremely fast though, and it actually began to make its way through our entrance doors. We came at it from both angles trying to block it from going into our little town here, but nothing would stop it. We would shoot at it, we would hit it, we would do everything in our power, but it just kept running. Not only was it running, but it was running very, very quickly, as I mentioned earlier. We had a really hard time trying to track it down, and once it got back into a dark area, it actually just went invisible once more. We continued trying to follow the tracks for a very long time, but eventually we lost sight of it completely. And because I could no longer see it, I decided to try our Hellcat rifle burners to see if I could get lucky and maybe burn it and get the light on it, but that didn't work out. So I ended up using Tony's grenades here to see if I could maybe blow it out with some explosions. That also didn't work. That, coupled with the fact that the people that we had chasing it were getting tired and hungry and were going to have mental breaks, meant that I needed to just kind of map out the area here using the planning tool so we'll at least know where it's at. This way we shouldn't have any issues finding it when we return in a few hours. And we didn't, but as we had returned, the Revenant actually began to attack one of our own. It would seem this abomination is finally going on the offensive. At first it seemed to be chasing Crane, but as he ran away from it, it then captured Moon with its hypnotic gaze, sucking out a piece of her very soul, knocking her to the ground. Though it was very dark and rainy, we began chasing the monster down using Fugly's flares to stun it and get it right where we wanted it. And it had finally worked. The Revenant had finally died, and in its wake it left a large pool of black liquid and what appeared to be its own spine. For security and research purposes, we decided to take its spine back to the containment facility, and I'm quite glad we did because after doing so, the Revenant had reformed. It would seem that a Revenant's spine itself is literally a piece of dark arco-technology that waits just to reform the Revenant. This creature literally cannot die unless its spine is destroyed. Meaning, of course, if this creature were to escape, it's going to be a complete bitch trying to get it back into its containment cell. Now with that finally out of the way though, we can get back to our main mission here of trying to get our defenses really upgraded around the base for when we decide to awaken the monolith, which we can now actually do as the Revenant is the last remaining advanced entity that we needed before we could do so. But we have encountered a little bit of an issue. It would appear everyone in our D class, all 4 of them, have decided to rebel. I suppose before we deal with any inhuman cosmic horrors from the void, we're going to have to squash this uprising first. The 2D class outside were pretty easy to take down, but Robert and another on the inside had actually armed themselves with pistols, making it a little bit more difficult. Nothing that we couldn't handle though, and after they both fell, we took them back to their rooms, and now we can finally begin working more on our defenses. We're actually going to begin researching autocannon turrets. Something tells me that our little mini turrets that we currently have just aren't going to cut it once the monolith is in full force. As we're working on that research, we'll also be periodically working on some spike traps all around our walls and doors as much as possible. Unfortunately though, I'm afraid to say that our defense building would once again be interrupted. This time around it's the sphere. It's actually becoming quite unstable and we're no longer able to suppress it. We're going to have to send it somewhere and hope that it can manage to take down the enemies and stay away from us. So we ended up using our Draw Shamblers ritual. The largest group of shamblers that we've seen thus far arrived not too far from the base. There were about 50 or so of them, I believe, and we immediately sent the sphere down there to rock their shit for them. And rock their shit it did. The sphere is a very dangerous adversary, but we already know that. It killed many of those shamblers, but in the end it actually ended up teleporting away before it could finish the job. I suppose it'll be left up to Fugly and the others. Nothing they couldn't handle though, especially since the sphere had destroyed the majority of them. After that, we had also finally recruited Yu. If you remember, Yu was actually one of the gentlemen that we found in the cryo sleep caskets, with a fairly mediocre skill set, though the most important part right now before we awaken the monolith is the fact that he can hold a rifle. Speaking of rifles, we had also finally finished our extensive research into autocannon turrets, but the issue is we don't have the materials to actually build even one, so I would actually send out a trade caravan to a nearby Outlander base. We would end up purchasing about half a stack of components, as well as I think around 180 to 200 plasteel if I'm not mistaken, and a marine helmet, which I almost forgot to mention. Back home though, Robert decided to thank us for our hospitality. He said it was time for him to move on, as if we hadn't captured him a few episodes ago, as if it were his choice. I don't think so, buddy. Don't worry, he's fine. See, he's already back on his feet. A few times, as you can see. We're gonna need to capture him, though. As you guys probably remember, originally when we captured Robert, his will was up to about 80 or so. But this time around, thankfully, it was only 2.5, so it should be quite easy to enslave him once more. We would then have some interesting Outlanders offer us an interesting weapon to deal with a heat wave, so of course we accepted. Well, it's actually less of a weapon and more of just an item. This is a biomutation lance. What this will do do is once it's used on someone, it will actually change them at the cellular level into a horrifying Archotech monster. Could be pretty useful against any humanoid enemies. After that, our trade caravan had finally returned home, and better yet, they had returned home with plenty of plasteel as well as components. It's finally time for us to begin working on our autocannons, as well as some other defenses around them such as sandbags and spike traps. We didn't have enough steel though, so we would have to mine some before we could try to finish up our autocannons, but after doing so it didn't take us very long at all to end up building our first. With these two new autocannons, our soldiers as well as our mini turrets should have a lot more defense and support. Now I was going to build more than just two out front at the entrance, but I wanted to expend our components on some smaller turrets that would actually surround the monolith itself, because quite frankly I have no idea what's going to come out of this when I awaken it, and I am very scared. I am feeling a little bit better though after getting these defenses set up, even though, I don't know, I don't feel very prepared at all, but we need to begin. First things first, I'm going to be putting Wise and Luna in Wise's room, since Luna is a child who can't really defend herself and Wise is incapable of violence. They are actually in her room because it is the furthest place in the base that they could go to and still have an escape route. The next thing I decided to do was to arm our D-class. Now I know this may seem a little bit weird, but they are going to be our expendable soldiers in this if need be. I also had Fugly inject the only serum we had left of our metal blood. And with that, my friends, it is finally time to begin. We will have Moon be the one to awaken the monolith. The sky darkens and a malevolent hum fills the air. The monolith has begun to awaken. Your actions have attracted the attention of something beyond human understanding. Though a little bit foreboding and frightening, I suppose this is exactly what we wanted to happen, is it not? After awakening it and the unnatural darkness came over the area, we had very large shard-like structures of obelisk falling from orbit. They seem to be connected to the monolith, as we would need to activate them to fully awaken it. However, several different types of entities would not make it easy for us to do so, such as the flesh beast, for example, who had sprouted up from a few small burrows in the area. Nothing that we couldn't handle though. Even as they approached, our autocannon took out the first one. This would be fairly simple for the most part, so we're going to try and focus our attention over on the western side towards one of the obelisks. Each of these structures though are guarded by one or more of the metal horrors, so we'll end up having to deal with those first, of course. Luckily, a barrage of bullets seems to do the trick. Now we can finally move on to the structure itself and begin activating it, which we did of course, but that's just simply one down and one more to go. It's also worth mentioning that each time after you activate one of these structures, there's a new entity attack that happens, which we'll see a little bit more of later on. As for right now, the attack only appears to be a sight stealer, nothing that we couldn't handle. There may have also been a few extra flesh beasts or something like that out in the woodwork away from the base, but it was pretty simple. For now. Or so I thought. I wasn't paying attention and Yaboyo had actually been ripped to shreds. Two Noctil had emerged from the shadows, ambushing him, completely blindsiding him, tearing him apart. I blame myself for this because I wasn't paying that good of attention, not expecting these to come out so quickly. But nevertheless, we would need to deal with it. I sent out a small squad to try and eradicate all the Noctil that were in the area. That way we could also retrieve the items that Yaboyo had dropped, as well as Yaboyo's corpse, of course. Which we did, and we took it back home with his weapons. We would build a beautiful marble sarcophagus to lay his corpse to rest in, but we wouldn't have that much time to mourn, as we still had quite a bit to do. I'm afraid to say it, but the longer that we wait, the worse things are going to get for us. We would need to go out and engage the remaining enemies to try and make our way towards the second obelisk. The entities put up a fierce defense, but in the end, with fire and with bullets, we had managed to cut through their lines, finally making our way to the second obelisk and managing to activate it as well. Now with the second one activated, the darkness begins to really intensify around us. Now thankfully the entire base is illuminated quite well, so we shouldn't really have too many issues there. However, I was beginning to realize that this awakening is most likely going to take quite a bit longer than I had anticipated, meaning our defenses may not last that long. Only time shall tell, though. Now that the structures have been activated and I didn't plan on sacrificing our D-class anytime soon, I thought it might be best to get those weapons out of their hands and pockets, that way we don't have another uprising. After that, I have began to realize something. The monolith was not awoken. This was not the awakening. Not yet, at least. We were simply in the intermission. We have more structures falling in about a day and a half that we'll have to activate. Well, with time like that, I thought this might be the perfect opportunity to have Moon here and her insane medical skill go ahead and install a tough skin gland as well as the bionic spine that we had purchased earlier onto Fugly. I had almost forgot to do this, and actually I had forgot to do this before we awoken the monolith, but I'm glad I remembered now. We also had a raging inferno engulfing our walls, which was a little bit of a problem because they were the main thing that was really keeping us safe from all the entities in the dark. Speaking of entities though, we actually captured that metal horror from earlier, though I don't really know what we should call him, but I do have some wonderful names for our Noctul that we had captured a few episodes back from you guys. We're going to be calling them Mothman, Scarecrow, and Necromorph in the order in which you see the comments next to them here. A huge thank you to Daniel Rock 7818, Cartavia 64, and Macutazul for these wonderful names. As we're waiting on these new structures to fall, we would also begin cutting up several of these entities for their twisted meat. As we all well know, the twisted meat is used for different types of serums, and I actually plan on using this twisted meat in particular to make some metal blood serums for everyone. This way Fugly won't be the only one with some insanely good defenses. Just in time, it would seem, as things were getting dark. Very, very dark. Not only this, but the new obelisk structures were falling from orbit. One of them was actually landing right next to our base. Now, this would make it much easier for us to activate it, but the problem was when it fell, these metal horrors were coming right for us. We rushed down to the entrance to try and take them down because they were beginning to strain our defenses a bit too much. We even managed to lose one of our autocannons. But once we had finally defeated the metal horrors, we could begin activating this structure. With the first of these new structures to be activated, this would cause a large group of gore hulks to assault the base, as well as many other entities that were in the area. The majority of this assault seemed to be made up by gore hulks as mentioned and devourers, as well as a few shamblers here and there. But I wasn't sure we'd be able to keep this up for too much longer. We would need to use our flare pack on Fugly to make a path towards the next structure so we could get this finished and be done with it. But there were so many things that went bump in the night. Two metal horrors attacked Born from the dark. We could barely even see them. Ramos 2.0 would stay behind and tend to Born as we went on to the second structure. Hopefully they don't encounter any more cosmic horrors. We would begin activating this one, and as I've mentioned several times, after activating one of these, of course, we have an entity attack. But the other one was just so close and we were running out of time. I thought after activating this one, we should just go and make a beeline straight for the other one. So we began throwing down flares and trying to make our way over there, but of course we instantly began encountering more metal horrors. It was during this time that our burners on the Hellcat rifles really came in handy. Now the metal horrors aren't exactly super flammable, but catching them on fire would make them flee, giving us a chance to run. As we were running though, I had failed to notice that Jasper was completely surrounded by metal horror and shamblers and was knocked to the ground. We basically had no time to try and rescue him though, because we ourselves were becoming surrounded. We had to rush back to the base where we could try to regroup before trying to save him. With our people severely injured, engulfed by enemies, as shamblers were attempting to bust down our doors, we were running out of options. Jasper was out there crawling around in a pool of his own blood, looking for someone or for safety. We couldn't even help him. No more. We will not be helpless. We busted down the doors and started chucking grenades and burning shamblers left and right. This is where we make our final stand. If the universe deems it so, we will die here today, backed by our brothers, covered in the blood of these monsters. Well, it would appear that we actually did it, with a lot of damage and a lot of injuries, but we still did it. Though we're not completely safe, we still have many of these entities trying to bust down our walls, which they've managed to do on several occasions by this point. We need to finish this now. We need to get to the third and last structure. When Luna is trying to help us kill Shamblers, things have become quite dire. We would have Fugly go into the warehouse and reload her flare pack. Thanks to her augmentation, she should be able to go and activate the last one alone. And so we would send her out, embarking into the darkness all by herself. Encountering any enemies alone could be extremely dangerous. Even with all her bionics, a group of these entities could take her down. Just then, a Noctul would rush out of the dark and try to engage her in melee combat. Throwing down a flare, stunning it, but unfortunately herself as well, Fugly would try to make an attempt to flee. Because of her bionic spine and heart, I knew Fugly would actually be faster than these monsters, so I tried to get her away where she could sit and take aim at them. Eventually, she killed the Gore Hulk and the Noctul. And now finally, we would be able to activate the last remaining structure. After doing so, the space around the void monolith would actually begin to shimmer. At first I thought this might be the air molecules, but no, I believe it very well may be reality itself. We rushed in as fast as we could, trying to get our turrets online in case something comes out of there. We would shut the doors behind us. This was it. Finally. The monolith was awake. The entire reason we even came to this planet to try and research it, opening right before our eyes. We were all gathered not too far from it. Well, at least what was left of us. Many of our members were in urgent care at the moment. Whatever happens or whatever comes out of that monolith, we will have to face alone with who we have here now. Brace yourselves. The monolith is now fully awake. A swirling dark vortex sits atop its peak, forming a conduit to the void. We're going to have to send somebody inside. As we all rushed in to attack any of the enemies, we would have Fugly begin activating this. Fugly seemed almost hypnotized by the monolith as she would continue staring at it. And then, nothing. The void. Somehow this place feels like nothing at all, yet everything all at once. Like it's completely dead, yet still roaring with life. Activating that monolith has literally ripped Fugly from our space-time into this universe. The air here vibrates with power. This metallic hell is a connecting channel to an inhuman hyper-intelligence that is beyond our comprehension. Drawn to it, she would decide to touch the sphere of power. A sphere of psychic energy, pure psychic energy. Its surface swells and twists, warping the space around it. Fugly feels it inside her mind deeper than any human sense. It defeats logic and sets her adrift in the void. She stands on the shoreline of an infinite black ocean of power, and it beckons her in. But Fugly's will and mind are strong. She shakes herself back to reality. Nearby Archotech devices seem to support the sphere. She could technically disrupt them, causing the phenomenon that have plagued our home for so long to go away. Or she could step into it, merging with the void. But the sphere also beckons to another. Moon could hear its calls, beckoning her in as well from the other side. She would also activate the monolith, sending her into the void. She would meet up with Fugly, and the two of them would begin discussing what they should do with this phenomenal power and how it continues to beckon them in closer. Fugly believes that they should disrupt it, stopping it completely, but Moon completely disagrees and decided to make a break for it. Fugly would attempt to shoot her down, but it was too late. Moon would embrace the void. Back home, the monolith was rumbling the entire base and shaking all the land around it, but finally it stopped. Then, out of nowhere, appeared Fugly and Moon, teleported back from the void. Naturally, there was quite a bit of animosity between the two of them. Moon was no longer the same. She appeared to be withered by the inhuman thought patterns of the void. All traces of humanity have left her eyes. Her mind and body are now permanently linked to the dark void of inhuman rage. Powered by this new connection, Moon no longer feels tethered to mortal needs like comfort or sleep. She also has somehow gained the ability to induce terror into others using the power of the void. The monolith continues to hum with Moon's reappearance, a reminder that its connection to the void has been opened and made permanent. We will not be able to stop these entities now, and it's all thanks to Moon. Fugly would try to stop her, but She was induced with horrific thoughts. With Fugly's mind temporarily corrupted by these terrors, it would be up to everyone else to try and stop Moon and Akio. A shootout would ensue, but we were still very low on numbers, as many of our members were still severely injured and awaiting urgent care. Knowing perhaps that they wouldn't be able to defeat all of us, Akio and Moon would make a break for it, rushing out of the containment facility, running to the edge of their territory, and they both actually managed to escape. God only knows what horrific things they have in mind, what they're plotting and planning. By this point, a month had passed, and many of our people were completely healed up from their wounds. We had been doing quite a bit of work around the base as well, such as ensuring that we have properly secured the monolith. Since it is the main link to the void, there's a good chance that it may send entities our way, or, well, we really don't know. But if it does happen, or when it happens, we want to be prepared. We still have the same amount of D-class, only they have nicer outfits that are more colorful and appropriate for their role, I would say. Though we have experienced a battle or two, we haven't really captured anyone, mostly just focusing on our base building. Unfortunately, by this point, we still haven't acquired enough organs for Ramus 2.0, and she is about to die from organ decay. But as you can also see, we do have a death refusal on her, so I think she'll be fine. Young Luna here is still a bit distraught about her parents completely leaving her to go do God knows what, but she has been taken under Fugly's wing, and everyone else is a little bit, so, you know, as they say, it takes a village. We're still securing and containing any entities that we come across, but as for now, we haven't discovered any new variants or varieties. We find that it's probably best that we don't provoke the void anymore. And for now, friends, this is where our story ends. Thank you for watching this series. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate your support. I hope you all have enjoyed. It seems as though most of you have, so I am extremely ecstatic about that. I have had a lot of fun with this DLC, and if I could be honest with you guys, as many years as I've played RimWorld, probably since maybe 2016, 2017, I've actually never beaten it. I've always just played colonies and done whatever I want, so I think this may actually be the first time that I've experienced an ending in any of the RimWorld DLCs or in RimWorld in general, so I'd like to thank you all for that. That has been quite the experience for me, and it's pretty cool. But I love you guys, and I hope to see you next time. Goodbye.